Hello and welcome to this week's reading of our class novel, Light on Dumyat. We are starting with chapter 13 and it's called Hounds on the Scent. An owl's hoot rang through the woods. It was not the hoo hoo the outlaws in Robin Hood films were apt to use. It was the shrieking kee-wick of the tawny owl. The clan knew its business. Mott put his hands to his mouth and another kee-wick resounded through the darkened trees. A figure emerged from nearby bushes and tiptoed up to him. "Has he moved yet?" said Claire's voice. "No," said Mott. "I'm frozen. I've been crouching here since midnight, but he hasn't stirred." Claire peered through the bushes at Gavin's house, its black outline clear against the night sky. Gavin's windows in the tower remained blank. "Do you think he went out one of the doors?" asked Claire. "No," said Mott. "I checked. They're all locked at night. It's the window or nothing." "I'll go home now, Claire. I'll send Michael at 5 a.m. Let's check our watches." They solemnly checked the time. "I brought a hot drink," said Mott, "and some sandwiches. There's plenty left." "Great stuff," said Claire. "Give them to me and I'll tuck them in at the bottom of this tree." She crawled into a little hide of branches that the clan had prepared earlier. "So long, Mott," she said, easing herself into a comfortable position. "So long, Claire," said Mott, and disappeared into the darkness. Claire gazed again at Gavin's window. She had 4 hours until Michael arrived. The clan had been watching Gavin's window since midnight. They were leaving nothing to chance. Claire put her hand to her mouth. A sharp whistle rang through the trees, now lit by the morning sun. Over on her right, Mott crawled out from underneath some bushes and looked over. He saw Claire's arm waving and beckoning. Mott put his fingers in his mouth. The same whistle, the alarm call of a blackbird, rang out. Michael heard the call when he was halfway up an ash tree. He quickly slid down. The 2 boys ran to where Claire was signalling. "I found him," she hissed, waving at them to crouch down. "Where?" asked Mott. "Beside the rocks at the beech grove," said Claire. "I saw him on the path a few minutes ago. Then he hurried into the trees and I lost him after that." "We can easily see him there," said Michael in a disappointed tone. "The trees are wide apart. Where could he hide there?" "I don't know," said Mott, "but let's go and find out." "All right," said Claire. "Let's just take it slowly. He may be cleverer than we think. It may be a trick to throw us off the scent." She began to weave her way through the trees, moving quickly and silently. The 2 boys trotted down behind her, the bows on their back bobbing up and down as they ran. They slowed down as the trees thinned out into large glades. Claire dodged behind some bushes. Again, the 2 boys fell in behind her like obedient dogs. Ahead of them was a clump of large rocks covered in moss. All around grew huge beech trees, their light green leaves making a roof that blocked out most of the sunlight, letting just small patches of yellow fall on their light grey bark. Claire shaded her eyes with her hand. "Do you see him?" she asked. 3 pairs of eyes swept the trees and rocks. Mott and Michael shook their heads. "Let's crawl to the rocks and see if we can spot him from there," said Claire. She began to move slowly forward until she reached the base of the rocks. Then she crawled around the side. Mott and Michael watched silently. Then Claire's hand appeared round the side of the rock and waved twice. The boys crawled over the leaves and grass until they too reached the rocks. Claire was crouching in a little gap. There was just room for the 3 of them. The boys slid silently in beside her. "Any luck?" whispered Michael. "Yes," said Claire, "but keep quiet. I want to see what he's up to. Besides, we don't want to catch him now. Let's make a proper job of it and grab him when he's asleep in his hut." "But we don't know where he'll sleep," said Mott. "Yes, we do," said Claire. "What do you think he's doing here? He's building a hut. Take a look for yourself." Mott peered over the edge of the rock. Down below in a clearing in the trees, Gavin was piling branches together. "What kind of hut is he making?" asked Michael. "I don't know," said Claire in a bored tone. "He's picked an easy place to be found. The smoke of his fire would be seen for miles." Michael took another look. "He's making a circle on the ground," he said. Claire and Mott also peered over. Gavin was marking out a circle on the grass. The clan watched silently as he took the branches and began sticking their thick ends into the earth, bringing the thin ends together in the centre. "Will we grab him?" asked Mott. "Oh, no," said Claire. "It's too easy. Let's get him when he's asleep. Besides, if we dash down now, we might get away. It's a shame. Let's go back to the cave. One of us should stay here and keep an eye on him. It's your turn, Michael." "All right," said the obliging Michael. "But how long do I have to stay?" "Until he's made a proper hut," said Claire. "Then we'll know that he's not kidding us, but we'll sleep there tonight." "Come up to the cave when you can," said Mott. "All right," said Michael. "If I'm late, I'll go straight back to the farm." Claire and Mott crept around the boulder and out of sight. Michael made himself comfortable. If he leaned back, he could just see Gavin through a notch in the rocks. Down below, Gavin was hard at work. "I've got to make it look good," he thought. "They're bound to have followed me, so I'll make a really good job of it." He made certain that all his branches were pushed into the earth, gathering together all the loose twiggy bits. He took a piece of string from his pocket and he tied the ends together. Standing back, he surveyed the framework of his hut. "It's a bit like the African kraals I've seen on television," he thought. "Now I need lots of ferns and leafy branches." He pulled out his knife and began to cut huge armfuls of ferns and grass, plus all the small leafy branches he could reach. "Now for the roof," he thought. "It must look as if I'm going to stay in it tonight." He began to weave the ferns in and out of the framework, plugging all the gaps with bunches of undergrowth and moss. His hut began to look like a small grass haystack. Gavin stood back and looked at his handiwork. It looked fine, a robust little shelter standing among the trees. He almost felt as if he did want to sleep in it. He pondered for a minute, sitting down with his back against a tree. He tried to think like a clansman. "I've built my hut. It's quite well hidden. What else would I be expected to do?" He looked at the hut. It was rather easily seen. "I know, I'll camouflage it." Gavin began to rake around the dead undergrowth of the glade. He hauled together piles of dead branches and some of the remnants of the ones he had cut. He piled them together artistically near the hut, partially hiding it from view. Then he walked through the trees and strolled casually past the hut. "Not bad at all," he thought. "I almost didn't notice it. I've built it and I've camouflaged it. Now I just make sure I could sleep in it." He went to the small entrance he had made and crawled inside. It was quite dark. He'd made the hut big enough to lie down. He stretched out for a moment on the ferns he had spread over the floor. He looked up through the roof, squinting against the flashes of sunlight that glimmered through the cracks. He sighed with contentment. It was a fine hut. Perhaps he might beat the clan after all. Above him in the rocks, Michael continued his vigil. He'd carefully watched Gavin build his hut and try it out. He remained very still as Gavin shouldered his rucksack and set off through the trees for home. Michael looked at his watch. It was time he went back to the farm. Later that night, the clan would return to pounce on the sleeping Gavin as he lay in his hut. Poor lad, thought Michael, all that work for nothing. "Spread out in a circle," said Claire, just a dark shadow amongst the trees. Mott and Michael crouched beside her. All three had blackened their faces and knees with soot so they would not easily be seen in the darkness. "What shall we do?" asked Mott. Claire looked at her watch. "It's 1 a.m, she said. "He's bound to be asleep by this time. But let's make sure he doesn't get away. We'll surround the hut, then creep up on him." "What happens then?" asked Michael. "Will we burst in on him?" Claire reflected for a moment. "No, that wouldn't be fair. I'll tap him on the shoulder, and when he wakes, I'll say, 'Gavin, you are our prisoner. The clan have won the contest.'" Michael and Mott looked suitably impressed. It sounded very dramatic. The three clansmen peered over the rocks at the edge of the beech grove. Down below, a dark shadow in the moonlight, Gavin's hut stood amongst the trees. Claire stood up. "I'll go round the back. Mott, take the left-hand side. Michael, you come through these bushes over there." "What if he makes a dash for it?" asked Michael. "Chase him," said Claire. "If we get separated, we'll meet again at the farm. If we catch him, tap him on the arm and say he is a prisoner." Right, let's go. Claire got down on all fours and wriggled through a gap in the rocks. Michael and Mott did the same and crawled away into the darkness. There was no sound except the sighing of the night wind in the branches. The three black shadows neared Gavin's hut. Claire raised a silent hand and the two boys rose to their feet. They stood beside the entrance. Claire peered through the door. Lying inside was a long, black, sleeping body. "He's there," she whispered. "Here goes." She tapped the figure on the shoulder. Nothing happened. She tapped again. Gavin seemed very stiff. "What's wrong?" said Michael, puzzled by the silence. Mott prodded the figure with his bow through the hut entrance. Claire felt in her anorak pocket and took out a torch. The beam of light cut through the darkness and landed on an old coat. "It's a dummy," gasped Claire, pulling the coat aside. Underneath, a pile of old clothes laid out to look like a sleeping body. Beside the body was a heap of old cooking utensils. Claire stamped her foot. "He's been cleverer than we thought," she said. "It's all been a trick. Where on earth can he be?" "There's something else," said Michael, pointing at a white object on the hut floor. "It's an envelope," said Mott, picking it up. Claire tore it open. She handed the torch to Michael. "Shine it here," she snapped. Inside the envelope was a plain white card. On it, in black letters, were the words, "Fooled you."